When a great metaphor literally lands in your lap, you'd be mad not to use it. DEI is the woke philosophy of diversity, equity and inclusion. They used to call it diversity, inclusion and equity, but then they realised the acronym was DIE. So they quickly switched the words around. DIE became DEI. DEI was and is the official hiring policy of woke governments and businesses around the world. The idea being, so far as I can tell, that in order to combat racism, sexism and white supremacy, minority groups of females, gays and people of colour should always be employed in preference to straight white boys and men, regardless of individual skills or abilities. This idea, which has become increasingly weird and widespread for the last decade or two, has always struck me as not only ludicrous, but also dangerous. But, to borrow from Mandy Rice Davies, I would say that, wouldn't I? But still, let's take a look at one example of the philosophy of DEI hard at work. This is a promo film for Endeavour Airlines, the airline that boasts that some of its flights are unmanned. Get it? Unmanned, meaning no man on the flight crew.
Girls, come on. Leave the saving the world to the men? I don't think so. I don't think so.
Live fast, die young, bad girls do it well. Live fast, die young. Nativa is a female version of a hustler, of a hustler, of a hustler.
A noble DEI pursuit, no doubt. Indeed, here's an ad for Endeavour Air back in June 2022, advising passengers to buckle up for their unmanned flights, #girl power. But more recently, there have been doubts raised about the wisdom of DEI and the wisdom of choosing people based on their sex, race or other identifying attributes rather than, say, merit or skill sets. Only last October, eyebrows were raised when a New Zealand warship valued at over $100 million crashed into a reef off Samoa, caught on fire and sank. What role the commander of the ship played in the sinking, if any, has yet to be determined, but there were plenty of people on social media quick to point out that this was not only her first ship command, which began in 2022, but that she was trained as a teacher, wanted to open a restaurant before joining the Navy, where her social media postings clearly appeared to champion diversity, equity and inclusion policies, anti-bullying, exclusion, inclusion, pink shirt day and so on, you know the stuff. The Chief of the Navy said that the commander was experienced and skilled. Then there was the unfortunate mid-air collision only 3 weeks ago where a helicopter ploughed into an airplane over the Potomac River. 67 people died. Again, many, including President Trump, were quick to point the finger of blame at the policies of diversity, equity and inclusion for being responsible for the collision, but there is no evidence to date that DEI did play any role. Regardless, for the last year or so, and especially since Donald Trump won the White House, more and more companies have been moving away from DEI. These include Google, Aldi, Target, Amazon and many others. Only last week, Forbes ran a piece chronicling all the US companies rolling back DEI, including JP Morgan Chase, whose boss James Dimon last week dismissed DEI as stupid. Plus Morgan Stanley and Citigroup, even Coca-Cola and PepsiCo are preparing to downgrade DEI. Farm equipment manufacturer John Deere said it would no longer support events like Pride parades. Some of this can be blamed on the high-profile, spectacular DEI fails of last year, including the departure of high-profile DEA Claudine Gay from Harvard. That was a disaster. And of course, the greatest DEI fail of them all, chosen by her boss because he wanted a black woman in the job regardless, apparently, of any other qualities. Here she was, the queen of DEI herself, on her very first day in the job.
We are bold, fearless, and ambitious. We are undaunted in our belief that we shall overcome, that we will rise up.
Yeah, and it never really got any better than that, year in, year out.
To see what can be unburdened by what has been.
What can be unburdened by what has been.
To see what can be unburdened by what has been.
Unburdened by what has been and knowing what can be.
What we know can be
unburdened by what has been.
Could watch that all day long. No wonder the brilliant Ayaan Hirsi Ali, herself a black woman, she's from Somalia, dismisses DEI altogether.
This DEI scheme is based on race and identity politics. And these things are terrible, and we've seen the outcome of that. So for the Trump administration to go out and say, let's get rid of this, I'm very much in favour of that.
So with all that in mind, let's go back and find out how our girls at Endeavour Air are faring, unburdened as they apparently were by any men.
Did somebody say
Slave.
Looks cool. Anyway, here's an Endeavour Air flight just the other day. According to unconfirmed reports, if it was unmanned, as per the adverts, the pilot was rumoured to have been a 26-year-old young woman who was only certified last month, though the airline says that all pilots were experienced. And here it is, coming into land. As I say, if that's not a neat little visual metaphor for the policies and idiocies of DEI, well, I can't think of a better one. Very fortunately, nobody D-I-E-D. But on to more serious matters. Yesterday's Anti-Semitism summit put on by this network was outstanding. Full marks to everyone involved. There were many highlights, and I recommend you take the time to watch it all on skynews.com.au. Personally, I wasn't really surprised that Labor's Mark Dreyfus was booed, but kudos to him for showing up. Similarly, Chris Minn's self-confessed shame at being the premier when the vile Opera House gas where's the Jews stuff took place clearly came from the heart. Well done, Premier. The Israeli ambassador Amir Maimon was very good and took the time to chat with us here at Sky beforehand. But the standout was clearly Peter Dutton.
Do you think the Migration Act should be amended so that anti-Semitic conduct is grounds to refuse a new visa?
Yes, without question. And we've announced that we'll tighten up Section 501. I want to send a very clear message to people who hate us, hate our country, hate Jewish people, hate other segments of our society, that under a government that I lead, they'll have no place in this country.
Now that's leadership. That's the leadership all of Australia, including Australian Jews obviously, can look forward to when Peter Dutton becomes the Prime Minister in only a couple of months' time. And finally, I don't want to dwell on this because it is beyond horrifying. It is beyond sickening. It is beyond depravity. It is beyond human understanding. The gory, vile death parade of baby coffins cheered on by huge crowds of leering and jeering Gazans was worse than the darkest imaginings of Hieronymus Bosch or Dante's Inferno. I'm afraid that although I'm quite good with words, God did not give me the tools to adequately describe the sheer revulsion and horror of what we all witnessed. As I have said for the last 16 months, every one of these depraved monsters must be hunted down and killed or face the full force of the law, including, I believe, the death penalty. Every so-called citizen who participated in this grotesque parade of depravity must be held accountable and face the appropriate punishment. And above all else, not a single one of these sick individuals should be allowed to set foot in this country, and the Albanese government should be held in absolute contempt for threatening the safety and security of everyday Australians by allowing members of that community, perhaps even people we saw amongst those cheering, disgusting crowds, to set foot onto this land.